Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Movie Battleground. We have a very special episode for you today. Two faces you've probably seen before. We have Alec going up against Kirk. Let's hear a little bit from him.
I'm Sinister Alec Miller here, representing the Sons of High Father.
What's up? This is Kirk the Consigliere, making my much-awaited Battleground debut. Much awaited for me anyway.
Here to bring you, basically just jump in and for my debut.
I've been watching movie debate shows for a long time now, sitting at home watching the fights.
On Movie Battleground, I've judged a few times. I think I kind of got the idea of how to win this game. So
developing my own arguments, learning how to take other people down, tweaking my debate skills, obsessing over it. Maybe that is obsessed too strong a word. I don't know. I'll let other people decide that. But up until now, everything I've learned has been stuck up in the old noggin.
Kurt, good luck to you. Hopefully, one of the best men win.
Today, finally, I get to unbird myself and let all those things I learned loose. And I'm really excited about it. Alec, good luck to you. But I do fully expect to contend for championship in this league. So today's just the first step. Let's do it.
All right, you've heard a little bit from the competitors. Let's get to the questions. We have some great questions today. But first, let's look at our excellent panel of judges. Real quick, let's say hi to Matt and Ryan. Matt, how you doing today?
Hey, it's good to finally get going.
You're not wrong, my friend. Ryan, what's up?
All right, how's it going? It's really good to judge a match. I mean, as someone who's competed in these matches, I finally get a chance to see what it's like on the other side. I don't have to debate anybody. I don't have to throw in my opinions until when it comes time to score. So I'm looking forward to this.
All right, cool. All right, if we are ready to go, let's get right down to it. The first question, I have a very vested interest, you two, so do not disappoint, please. Question number one, what is the best Pixar movie? Let's start with Kirk with your 90-second opening.
All right, what makes a great Pixar movie? Great Pixar movie is a complete family film. It's relatable. There's something everybody connect to, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of situation. It is a universal story. A great Pixar movie is a beautifully crafted story, both visually and literally. And a great Pixar movie creates a exciting new world for you to escape into, while at the same time having something to say meaningful about your real life. And the movie I feel that does that greater than any Pixar movie is The Incredibles. It has a cast of amazing characters that you can latch on to regardless of who you are or where you're at in life. Everybody has seen themselves in the parts at some point. It's a great story told in a groundbreaking visual way. It has a great look. It has a great score. And it is all wrapped up in maybe one of the greatest superhero stories we've ever seen. I'm going to argue as we move forward. I don't think my opponent's choice hits all those criteria the same. Not a bad movie, but it's no Incredibles.
All right, good. Perfect. Great opening. Let's hear from Alec.
I'm gonna actually agree with you on this, Kirk. What you need to hit in a Pixar movie is all those things that you mentioned. However, the way I also look at it is with a Pixar movie is how many times does it hit me emotionally and can pull out a legit reaction from me that I can't even help. And to me, the movie that did that for me on multiple occasions in the movie was Inside Out. I absolutely love this movie. I adore this movie. It has all the heart, it has all the laughs, and even the tears in some points of the movie. And it had me leaving, after I left that movie, it had me thinking about my time as a child and what I was going through when around the same age that Riley was. So we'll get into that more. And that's my opening.
All right, perfect. Two great movies. Can't wait to hear more about it. Would anyone like to use their minute extension?
I think I'm good.
Good?
Yeah,
all right, perfect.
Let's
get into it. 5 minutes whenever you're ready.
I would say that I agree with you, Alec. The first time I saw Inside Out, I had all those emotional responses. My daughter happened to be 11 years old at the time, so I sit next to her watching that movie. So it did bring out a lot of the feels watching that. But the thing is, in successive viewings, it doesn't seem to have as much to offer. All those things, all those emotional beats it hit really seem to be surfacey, and there wasn't once you scratch that surface, there didn't feel as much to be below that. On the other hand, when you look at a movie like The Incredibles, that movie is eternally rewatchable. There's so much there. And as far as, telling a story about a kid growing up, you watch Dash and you watch Violet, you see them grow up through that story. And the more I watch that movie, the more I relate to them and what they go through than what I see, anything I see in Inside Out.
Yeah, I'll disagree with you on that point of that it loses the impact each time you watch Inside Out. Whereas each time I watch Inside Out, I get something new from every viewing, based on what happens in her life. Sometimes the part where Bing Bong dies catches me a little bit more. Sometimes the part at the very end where she's curled up in her family's arms just hits me instantly. And with The Incredibles, I love The Incredibles. The Incredibles is a fantastic movie, but I don't ever really have that emotional impact, like that emotional hit where it just makes me have to, cry some man tears, get the little G tear coming down my face. I just, to me, like I find myself actually lately going back to The Incredibles 2 more often than I do The Incredibles 1, because I always seem to have just a little bit more fun in that movie, a little bit more impact in that movie, and I think seeing them grow more in Incredibles 2 than I saw them grow in Incredibles 1.
I think Incredibles 2 expands their story, expands the world, but I think you get the basis of the family within that first movie. And I'll go to 2 of your points there. The first thing where you're talking about Riley curled up in her, the parents' arms and things like that. Those are great moments. Unfortunately, those are sidetracked. The much more relatable and the much more interesting story in that movie is Riley and her family, and that's put on the back burner as we look at these one-note, basically colored shapes running around in her brain. There's not a lot of depth going on inside inside the world of her mind. The characters are very what they are. Joy is joy. Disgust is disgust. They are all very one note. The animation is, I think, pretty weak for Pixar, and I would much rather see an entire movie about Riley and her family. I think that would be interesting, and I think that's why Incredibles is a lot more interesting, because it is about a real human family, their real human experiences, even though they are superheroes in this, extraordinary circumstance. They are relatable. They're a normal family. They all have normal family problems that we've all seen. We've all gone through.
See, but the depth is there, because it's the idea that even though you say that the movie would have been better with just focusing around Riley, but you don't get Riley without those different emotions inside of her. And the movie is about it's not just about one emotion inside of you. It's all about all the emotions coming together and creating who you are as a person. And I can relate to that. And the fact that, like, one of the biggest parts that gets me is when Joy realizes it's not everything can't always be fun and happy and all this stuff. There's always a little bit more in your emotions that tie into, like, so she's happy, but she didn't realize what was going on before, and that sadness is essential to who Riley is as a person. With The Incredibles, to me, the characters aren't relatable. The only character I was really relatable to was Violet, because the whole being shy and all that stuff. I used to be a little shy kid, but with Mr. Incredible, I don't have any kind of relating to him. I kind of hate him in the beginning when he's talking to I always forget his name, Syndrome. When he was a kid, I always kind of don't like him at that point. I was actually more interested in Bon Voyage in the beginning than I was in Syndrome and later on in the movie. So I just think that the depth is completely there for Inside Out.
But you do admit you do have a character that you latch onto, and I think that's the point of that movie. Is there's somebody there for everybody. As a father, as somebody who has to take on those burdens of a father, I relate to Mr. Incredible. I look back to my childhood when I was a kid, and when I wanted to conquer the world, and I was held down by things that were out of my control, that were that I didn't understand. Back then, I could see myself like, oh, I was Dash. And I think everybody had, like I said, of course, not everybody's going to relate to everybody, but they are going to find something there, something in the parts that they can cling on to. Where like I said, with Riley, sure, but she's a side character in that movie.
Time.
Oh wow, that went fast.
That was fast.
Time.
Indeed, it does go fast, gentlemen, but you definitely said a lot.
You may not blow by.
We are going to do some 60-second closings right now. Since Kirk, you started. Alec, we're going to have you do your closing first. So whenever you're ready, 60 seconds.
So yes, Incredibles is a great movie, but to me, it's not even the best Incredibles movie, let alone the best Pixar movie. With Inside Out, you have a fully fledged story, all in one. That if you see it go on again, great. But to me, that was such a perfectly wrapped bow on that story. The relationship between sadness and joy is one of my favorite things that I've seen in any Pixar movie, and just that ultimate ending where she realized that you need sadness to be who you are. I mean, it just gets me every time. So. That's why Inside Out is the best Pixar movie.
All right. Very well done, Kirk. You're winding up. Please give us your 60-second closing.
Incredibles has a cast of characters that anybody who's ever been a family can relate to. Has a great villain, Jason Lee, also relatable. You see where he's coming from. Great animation, groundbreaking animation. They had to invent new computer animation. This is the first time Pixar did humans. Everything you see there is brand new. They invented it for this movie. The voice cast in Inside Out is kind of weak. They're all one note. Everybody's just doing what they've done on Saturday Night Live or The Office or whatever. You get some real out-of-the-box Edna Mode. You get Frozone. Great cast of characters. Great world. Amazing world building. Great superhero world. Great story. Very relatable. It's their most complete family film, where Inside Out is more, when you look at it, I think made more just for kids. Simple colors, simple shapes. Incredibles is a more complex and developed world with a more complex and developed story.
All right. And that is round one in the books, ladies and gentlemen. And what a great round it was. Definitely a lot to be said, but your fate is now in the hands of our judges. So let's start with Ryan. Ryan, if you don't mind, please give me your thoughts on this round and who you're giving your point to.
Well, first off, clearly Kirk and Alex know exactly what they're doing here. These guys make great points. Truth, both of these are great picks here. I don't have a best Pixar film. It's interchangeable, but to the point at hand, Kirk, in your final moments when you said that Incredibles was more complex, was more better story structure, better world building, I could add that same point to Inside Out. Personally, I didn't like the movie because Joy threw me off, but the point of Inside Out is you see this whole world that's built throughout Riley's character, and there is more complexity, more dimensions into the emotions themselves, especially through what Alex said on when you find something new on rewatch. And also he did hit you when he said that for Incredibles 2 there was more growth and more emotional hits because there was more focus on the family dynamic, where in the first one it was heavily on the father. And I kind of get, when you watch it again, there is something more to find out, but mainly on those points alone, I'm going to go with Alec on this one.
All right. 1 point to Alec. Matt, let's hear what you got to say.
Well, to start with, Alec brought up the fact of her family and how that tied into it. But then Kirk came back with, that would have been a better story. I watched Inside Out with my 9-year-old, and most of the time he was like, it's okay. But then Kirk brought up the whole family dynamic in Incredibles. And that was the whole point of the story, was them trying to be the difference, being regular people, but also having powers. So I'm going with Kirk with this one.
Okay. All right. We're all tied up, which means I have to do work. Thank you, judges. All right. So excellent first round. Neither of these are my favorite Pixar movie, but I appreciate both of yours opinions, and you definitely stated them clearly. I think the biggest thing that hit me, and unfortunately Alex sort of fed into it when he said he only related to Violet, and Kirk's probably made the best point of the round when he said, yeah, because everyone has their own character to relate to. I thought Kirk hit a lot on the voice talent, and he pointed out something interesting in a movie I love, which is Inside Out, that the more interesting story is sort of a sidetrack, and that's Riley and her family. Not something I thought I'd agree with, but Alec made great points. I think his movie has the more emotional, gut-wrenching moments, but overall, I think Kirk made the better case for the better overall movie. So round one goes to Kirk.
Okay.
Right. Well done. Great first round. Without any ado, let's move on to round number two. And round number two question is, what is the best movie based on a Broadway show? So, since we started with Kirk last time, Alec, when you're ready, your 90-second opening will begin when you start talking.
So I am a very brand new fan to musicals, and I haven't really caught as many of the Broadway musicals. But one that had really caught my eye and has always kind of sat with me was Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber. That to me, this movie is dark. It's a very dark revenge story about a man trying to basically get revenge on the man who was responsible for the death of his wife and the kidnapping and now raising of his daughter, and he literally sent him away for so many years. When he comes back, he has all of this anger and this dark, twisted plan to get him back. It's sort of very much in tune with Harley Quinn and the Joker, with the relationship between between Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter's character, especially in one of the songs. And it's Tim Burton doing, I think, what Tim Burton's good at, and that's, dark, twisted stories. And instead of doing Dumbo and trying to turn his little dark, twisted stuff on other movies. So I'm going to go with Sweeney Todd.
All right. Shots fired at Dumbo. Kirk, whenever you're ready, 90 seconds will begin.
You guys remember that scene in Dog Day Afternoon where Moretti calls Sonny out of the bank and says, "Take a look what you're up against"? I'm going to use my opening statement to show Alec what he's up against, because the movie I picked for Best Broadway Adaptation is West Side Story. West Side Story is a movie that is based on Romeo and Juliet, which is almost universally considered to be one of the greatest love stories in the history of written language. It was a movie that was nominated for 11 Oscars, won 10 of them. That is an amazing win percentage, the most ever for a musical. West Side Story is rated number 51 on American Film Institute's top 100 movies of all time, not musicals, movies of all time. On the musical list, it's number 2. It has been selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. It is a movie that combines the mediums of cinema and live stage perfectly, gives you the best of both worlds. It is one of the best, most iconic films, not musicals again, most iconic films of the 20th century. It is still referenced. It is still relevant. For 60 years now, 4 generations of moviegoers have loved this movie. It's still being talked about. It's still being performed. And Alec's movie is fine.
Very good. All right, cool. Great opening statements. Whenever you two are ready, unless you want to extend it, we will get into the 5 minutes. We good?
I'll use my extra. I learned my lesson last time. I'll use my extra minute here.
All right, we are up to 6 minutes for the debate back and forth round. So whenever you two are ready, please begin.
Alec, you mentioned something about being able to get into his Sweeney Todd story, and at the beginning, I agree with you. When you find out his story, what happened to his wife, his daughter, you can get on board for that. You can't, I was, some visceral part of me wanted to see him get revenge against Alan Rickman's character, but at the point where that becomes impossible for him, and he just decides, I'm going to murder indiscriminately. He's completely lost me. There's no one in this movie to root for. You have just this vile murderer who's killing people randomly. They put in one scene where he spares a guy whose child and wife are sitting in the room with him. And all that made me do is think about, okay, what about all the people he murdered whose wives and children were at home? Honestly, he reminds me of, one of these mass shooters you see in the news who's angry at the world and is just going to, feels he has a right to just take it out on everybody and, do harm to whoever he wants. Helena Bonham Carter's character is equally despicable in this movie. She lies about his wife, which ends up getting her killed. She immediately agrees to murder and cannibalism because she has the hots for Sweeney Todd. There's no one likable in this movie. Those are your 2 protagonists right there, those 2 people. As opposed to West Side Story, you have 2 groups of people who are misunderstood, who don't really understand themselves, and you can find people to root for on either side, and you don't really want to see anything bad happen to either of them. There is some violence, there's some murder, but it's all through mostly misunderstanding, where Sweeney Todd is a vile, despicable murderer.
Yeah, he is. He is a vile, despicable murderer, and you're not really supposed to be on his side by the end of the movie. By the end of the movie, you're supposed to be basically cheering for this guy to get his comeuppance. But to me, watching the story of him having to learn what happened to his family was, to me, worth the watch. Whereas with your movie, I am a younger person, so when I first watched this movie, and I've only seen it the one time, I was just honestly bored out of my mind. I was watching the first song. The songs are kind of like, they're kind of old school, so I'm not really into them. The story, the acting is not really that great to me. First of all, just to get, when the movie starts, the first thing you got to do is you got to sit through like 4 or 5 minutes of just a song playing on a changing screen. And by the time I get there, I'm already out of the story. Whereas with Sweeney Todd, the performance that Johnny Depp gave, it was a little bit more in tune with what he was doing back then and not doing, what's his name? Captain Jack Sparrow over and over again in every single movie. That was a little bit going back more towards his older, darker type of things. And then, to me, the story of Alan Rickman played an amazing villain in this movie. I actually couldn't stand him by the end of this movie, and I couldn't wait to see him get his comeuppance at the end. Even if it became impossible for Sweeney Todd. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, if it's not your bag, that's one thing. But I mean, personally, I look at the Mona Lisa and I'm like, I don't get it. But we have hundreds of years of art criticism that tells me I'm wrong. And I think we look at all those points I made before about the Oscars, the awards, the critics list. These are all things that show us that this movie is worth staying test time, even if it's not necessarily for us. I'm personally, it's not the greatest thing. I'm not that into musicals. I enjoy the movie, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie. But I definitely see the worth in it. As far as the acting, it won 2 acting Oscars. Amazing performance from Rita Moreno. Also, George Chakiris also won an Oscar for this. Won Best Director, Best Picture, Best Song, Best Editing. It was awarded from every possible angle of filmmaking. Let me talk about Alan Rickman 1 minute. Played an okay villain. The man cannot sing. He cannot sing at all. Johnny Depp can carry a tune, kinda. But when you take these 2 actors who can't sing that well, and Tim Burton, instead of finding an actor who could sing, he said, well, I got to put Johnny Depp in heavy makeup and a wig because that's filmmaking to Tim Burton. So, you have these 2 weak actors and you have them singing a song. Let me sing you some of the lyrics, give you some of the lyrics to a song that played Pretty Women. These 2 average at best singers sing the song that's basically just a list of things people do. Sipping coffee, standing on a stair, blowing out candles. I kid you not, these are literally the lyrics. The music in this movie, to begin with, is kind of weak, and when you put in the voices of these guys, not that great. As opposed to music in West Side Story, great music, and it has something to say. If you listen to America, it tells the experience of immigrants in this country and expectations versus reality. If you listen to Officer Klumpke, it really explores. It's a funny, silly song, but it explores what these kids hear about themselves, what people are telling about them, and trying to come to some kind of understanding of what's wrong with them and what they should do with their lives. So when you can make music where people are, tapping their foot but still thinking, you've really accomplished something. That's what the music in this play does.
And I get what you're saying about all the awards and stuff, but to me, like, the awards don't mean everything in my eyes. When I look back at this movie, to me, it's extremely outdated. It just doesn't hit all the right notes that I should feel when I'm watching it, because, like you said, I've heard about this movie. This movie is known throughout. Basically, if you're a movie fan, you know about this movie. Only the reason I know about it is because of Steven Spielberg is making his remake, and I'm more excited about that than I was while watching this movie. So, with Sweeney Todd, you have, to me, in my eyes, you have Tim Burton, to me, going back to doing something that I'm a little more used to him doing and liking him doing, where that's telling the dark stories, doing his thing, and doing his thing, and exploring all these dark thoughts.
All right.
It's time, guys.
Even that went fast.
Yeah.
Getting a little heated when you're supposed to be good. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Perfect. No, both doing well. All right, you have 60-second closings. Since we started with Alec, Kirk, you may do your closing first whenever you start talking.
Alec, you said the movie's outdated, but then you went and said right away that they are making a remake. So obviously there's still revenants. There's still demand for this story. This play is still produced by high schools, by teenagers. hundreds or not thousands of high schools across the country every year performing this because they still connect to this story. They still connect to West Side Story, what the people are going through there, even though it's a little bit older. Yeah, awards don't mean anything. If it was just awards, it would have faded, but it was put on the AFI list 50 years old. It was nominated by the Library of Congress when it was 40 years old. So this movie has definitely stood the test of time. People still want to see it. There's still demand for it. People still love it. It's iconic. I do this, you know exactly what it is because everybody, like you said, even if you don't like it, you know what it is because it's so prevalent everywhere in our culture.
All right, and moving right on along to Alec, with your closing statements.
With Sweeney Todd, you got Tim Burton doing what he came up doing and what people fell in love with him for. You have Johnny Depp pulling on a great hero/villain by the end of it. Helena Bonham Carter playing the despicable character that she was meant to be from the very beginning to the very end, and a really good revenge story. And you get to see a guy basically get his revenge on this person that hurt him. With West Side Story, it's an outdated movie. It doesn't quite hit all the notes that maybe it did back in the day. And like I know you said that it's going to be a remake because it's culturally relevant. Maybe it's going to be a remake because it needs to be done again because it just wasn't that good back then.
And time. Alec taking multiple shots at multiple movies this round, but I appreciate it.
Fighting dirty.
No, it's good. I like it. Great round. Let's hear what some of the judges have to say. Let's go to Matt first.
I like how Kirk came out and started with the fact that West Side Story's been around for decades now, and it's still relevant. And then he came out swinging at Sweeney Todd that he is a villain, and they're committing cannibalism. They're killing people and committing cannibalism. And when he brought that up, Alec didn't respond to it. And he kept bringing up the fact that West Side Story's been around for so long, and people have heard of it. They might be bored with it because of the time. But then he also brought up in Kirk's defense that it is being remade. They don't take movies that have such such an impact on our generation and remake it if it's not a good movie. So again, I go with Kirk.
All right. 1 point towards Kirk. I will go next with my decision, which might be a little bit of a hot take here, but I got to go off what I heard. And for me, Kirk talked a lot about awards, a lot about lists. And personally, those sorts of arguments are easily debunked for me. So I was just waiting for Alec to say it, and he did, that those are all sort of subjective things that don't necessarily mean anything. I know he didn't say this, but like Crash won an Oscar, so that kind of thing. So for me, those arguments were sort of debunked. And then Kirk's real other attack on Sweeney Todd was that they're villains, they're despicable characters, you don't really root for them. But I think Alec actually did a good job of combating that and saying that it's not the characters you root for, it's what they've got coming to them that's what you root for. So he sold me on that. There is something to root for. And I gotta not lie. I gotta tell the truth that when he said West Side Story is a little outdated, I kind of agreed with him a little bit. And the fact that they're remaking it, I think sort of plays to his point there. So my point for this round is actually going to go to Alec. So Ryan, my apologies, but you do have a tie to break.
Okay. This one's not going to be easy. I do have I got like a half page of notes from your guys' debate. I mean, you guys brought up some really good points. Now, Kirk, I am going to say that you did a good job bringing out the acclaimants, like what it had, like the technical achievements, its critical acclaim. But the thing is that Alec did state right that it is subjective. I mean, and when you brought up the AFI list, personally for me, I would have fought you on that too, because there are some movies on the AFI list that are not as relevant as they are today and rewatching it. But Alec, when Kirk kept hitting you on the story of Sweeney Todd, I mean, yes, the characters aren't that likable. Depp and Alan Rickman are not good singers, and Tim Burton kind of admits that they're not very great. He only does his best to harmonize all of his actors. And also, there was just something, you were really leaning on a lot of the dark tones, the macabre setup of it, which it's one of Burton's strengths, which is great. But I just got so many notes here, so I'm just gonna come down to this. Kirk, you kept hitting and attacking Alec on Sweeney Todd for its story and its characters, but you really weren't making a case for the characters and the story of West Side Story. I mean, if you had brought more on the love of Tony and Maria, the misunderstanding between both the Jets and the Sharks, and what really could have been, like, if you had expanded more on the misunderstanding between both of these gangs, you could have said the ending was completely avoidable. But for Alec, not only did he stay strong on the fact that these characters aren't likable, but he did stress out, yes, you want their comeuppance. And when you said that Sweeney Todd was painted as a hero, but then his action turned him into a murderer, you just made that point much stronger. So I'm gonna go with Alec on this one.
In a shocking upset, Sweeney Todd beats out West Side Story, and we are tied at 1-1. So let's get to the final main round question. And that main round question is, what was the worst movie that won an Oscar for Best Screenplay, either original or adapted? So we started with Alec last time. So Kirk, please.
2005 is remembered as one of the all-time great blunders for the Oscars because that is the year that, as Nicholas mentioned, Crash won the award, Best Picture award. Not talked about as much is the fact that it also won Best Screenplay, which is mind-blowing because all the problems that everybody has with this movie starts in the screenplay. It's a terrible screenplay. It is shallow. It is it tries to have something to say. It has nothing to say. It's tone deaf. It's boring. There are no great performances. And again, it's just trying to tell a message, but failing horribly. It is an after-school special made for adults, but only adults whose social consciousness hasn't matured beyond after-school specials. There's nothing really redeemable about this movie. I think there's, like I said, there's nothing to stand out like, oh yeah, at least this person did this, or at least there's that one scene. Everything about it, it's muddled, it's dark, it's an ugly-looking movie. Really has nothing to offer. Just shocking that it won Best Picture. Shocking that it won Best Screenplay. Totally didn't deserve it. Worst movie to ever win that award.
All right. I'd like to point out that I did not know that was his choice when I made that comment earlier.
But you said it, no take back.
So let's move on to Alec with your opening statement. Please begin.
Kirk, you want to bring up a muddled story? Look at the very last hour and a half of Lord of the Rings: The Return of the King. That movie constantly ends over and over and over again, and to me that is not good writing. When you can't put they put a tiny bow on like five different times to the point where I was already wanting to walk out the theater after maybe the third ending. As someone who loves this series, this movie wasn't even the best Lord of the Rings movie, so I don't understand how it won the best written Lord of the Rings movie. So I don't even understand how it won the best Oscar for it. It only won the best Oscar because of the fact won all these Oscars because it was the very last one. It's like they were just kind of gifting everything else that it did before. So they gave all these Oscars to Return of the King when it did not deserve it. And yeah, I'll say the rest for the argument.
All right. Last chance for anyone to use their 1 minute extension, or Alec, for you to use your 1 minute extension. Yes, no?
No, I'm good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's the fight we've all been waiting for. Crash versus Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. Please begin.
Okay, Alec, let me ask you, just to clarify, Alec, you saying you do like this movie then?
No, I don't like this one. No, I like the older movie. You do like Lord of the Rings.
Okay, all right, okay. I agree with you. It is a little too long at the end. It does wrap it up, but it wraps up this huge story. It has so many, those two movies that you love, they had to wrap everything up. If it would have been short, if they'd cut that out, then you wouldn't have had resolution to so many of those stories, so many of those things that we've built up to for 9 hours now, 9 hours worth of movies. And again, if you, and I agree with you, I mean, it's a little too long, but that doesn't make it the worst movie to ever win this award. And if you look at it from a screenwriting standpoint, as we were talking about specifically about this, the screenwriting, Lord of the Rings, the actual book, the ending is much longer. It goes on for much longer. So the fact that they were able to craft this down into a 3-hour and something minute movie was actually a feat of screenwriting, and they actually knew what to take out. There in the book, there's chapters after what we see where I think Wormtongue comes back to the Shire and takes over, and they have to fight him, and they very easily could put all that in the movie, and they wisely cut it out, just as they cut out a lot of stuff throughout all the books wisely. They crafted that story into a palatable movie. That's what they did with the end of this. A little too long, yeah, definitely not the worst. That doesn't make it the worst screenplay. If you don't mind, I want to take you into set the scene for Crash a little bit. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the first scene. There's an actual car crash between two women. One of them is an Asian woman who gets out of her car and says that she hit her brakes. Not her brakes, her brakes. So right off the bat, this movie that is speaking of, supposed to comment on racism and all these social things, locks on to the cheapest, most easy stereotypes that does that all through the movie. Everybody in this movie, every character is just their race. It's all very surface. It has nothing really to say. It's a very like nice. You know who loves Crash? The dad from Get Out. It's a great movie for him because what that movie does, that movie tells white people that no matter how racist you are, if you do one nice thing for a minority, then all is forgiven. That's the point of Crash, and it's a despicable storyline, and it has nothing else to offer. It's a terrible movie.
Now you bring up the endings for the books, but this is like the majority of watchers, maybe the mainstream audience that watches these movies, didn't read Lord of the Rings, so they don't know about all those scenes. All they know is what they got, and what they got was 500 different endings, being obviously over exaggerating. So many endings that with each one just kind of hit a little less every time it ended. So you have the story of the Battle of Minas Tirith, and the battle, it's so muddled. There's so much stuff going on inside the battle, and then at the very end, there's a Deus Ex Machina. It's just oh, the ghosts are here. Let's just end it now, because they had already gone too far.
They set up the Deus Ex Machina. They set that up in the story. That's not Deus Ex Machina. They set up specifically why that comes. That plays into the sword being rebuilt. That's the whole story of Aragorn's return. That's a big part of the Return of the King, is that army coming back and serving him. But I mean, what you're focusing on is like the last maybe 45 minutes of a 3-hour movie. You have a lot of great stuff in that movie, a lot of great stories, still great performances. Ian McKellen, Viggo Mortensen, John Rhys Davies, Andy Serkis. You see Gollum going full heel. Hugo Weaving's awesome in it. So much good stuff in that beginning of that movie. But again, it's an epic. It's going to be long. But I mean, are we just going to not? If we're going to say, oh, Godfather's too long, Lawrence of Arabia is too long, all these movies, that's what these kind of movies are. They're long. And let me ask you this: if this movie is so bad, if the worst thing about this movie is it's so long, and it's overlong, and the end is too long, then how did they justify a special release with an extra 50 minutes that put the runtime over, I think, at 4 hours and 10 minutes? If this is such a bad movie because it is so long, then then why were there so many people out there clamoring saying, "Hey, this movie that's so long, give me another hour of that, please"?
It's not even necessarily that the movie's so long. It's just the fact that like every time with each one, the dialogue doesn't hit as well, and it kind of just starts making me where I don't really care about what's going on anymore. I'm just like ready for this to be over, because of the fact that I fell in love with these characters in 1 and 2, and then 3, it just kind of was I'm trying to come up with a word I can't come up with. It's kind of like a dud. It just didn't land, didn't hit. Whereas with Crash, you have all these characters that you have to do things. You're trying to make a statement, and sometimes with these statements, that can get muddled. But they were trying to make a statement. I won't necessarily agree with the statement that it was making, but to get there, it was still a decent movie that was being made inside the script. It just it wasn't the greatest thing to be made, but it also wasn't the worst.
Time.
Why? I think.
Oh, time.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's good.
All right, time. Well done. All right. Last section of the main round. We're going to have you each do a 60-second closing. I believe Kirk started, so Alec, give your closing first.
The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King only received its best screenplay Oscar because of the fact that for the other two movies, they just wanted to basically reward this series because the series, everyone loved it. Whereas when you actually watch the movie and think about like all the endings that went into it, and it just kind of fell flat to me. It fell completely flat by the end of the movie. The characters are just kind of boring by the end of the movie. Whereas with Crash, even though you don't necessarily agree with what the statement was, the journey to get there was laid out. It was pretty out there, basically put all out in front of you. So they set out to do something and they accomplished it. So it's not the worst, but it is, not a great movie, but it's also not the worst to ever win best screenplay.
All right. Move right along to Kirk. Kirk, close us out.
I'd buy your argument that they only gave it the best picture because to reward everything else. Maybe best picture, maybe best director, throw Peter Jackson a bone. This movie won 11 Oscars. It swept all its categories. So obviously there's more to it than just a throwing him a bone. Crash absolutely does not set out to achieve what it sets out to achieve unless it's just, hey, racism is bad and white people, you're okay. Just do one nice thing. You'll be all right. Lord of the Rings, on the other hand, it does take its time, maybe a little overlong, but it does wrap up all these loose ends that it was building up to. You have to finish with Sam at the end. He becomes the hero of that movie. You get his ending, his strong ending at the end. You feel the emotional impact. I'm home. This journey's over. That in itself is a great ending. And Return of the Green is a great movie. Maybe not the greatest ever wins best screenplay. Definitely not the worst. Crash, honestly, maybe the worst.
All right, and time. Well done. Well done, you two. All right. I will be going first, and just so you know where my head's at, I'm going to reread the question. The question was, what is the worst movie that won an Oscar for best screenplay, either original or adapted? To me, that means the caveat is that it won the Oscar, and then you got to tell me why it's the worst movie, not necessarily the worst screenplay. And I think that from the beginning, Kirk sort of hit on the acting, on the writing, and how the writing is bad from the get-go, whereas Lord of the Rings Return of the King's writing maybe isn't the greatest sort of halfway through. Unfortunately, I heard nothing about the acting, about the story, and I think Kirk really did sell us on why Lord of the Rings is still a good movie, even if it maybe didn't deserve the screenplay Oscar. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to give this point to Kirk. So let's move right along to Ryan.
Okay, first off, just a general observation on Crash. I mean, you guys really focused a lot on the whole message when it came along to, white people, you're okay with one act. But the funny thing is that the story does lean more on the other minority groups. I mean, there is a story among Black people. There's one story among a Latino and I believe a Middle Eastern man that really leads into what really is in the screenplay a big cop-out and something that was clearly written to just draw the emotions. I mean, I won't get further into it, but I think that was kind of one of the knockdowns I'm going to give you, Kirk. If you had focused more on other than just, I loved your line, after school special for adults who clearly just don't get it or who fail to grow up. I love that. I was just hoping that you would expand more on the message instead of having it summed up. I understand time limits, but if you had taken maybe a few extra seconds to focus more on some of the other minority groups that the message seems to fail on, your argument would have came out stronger. Alec, I will have to say the last 40, 45 minutes, hour, I don't keep track, is a good argument to make, but I don't think that was really enough to secure your win for this argument. I mean, if you did brought back more further down, like on rewatchability of Lord of the Rings, some of the holes and you'll start seeing holes in the screenplay itself, especially with the Deus Ex you talk about as the reforging of the sword and the undead army, which Lord of the Rings fans themselves are starting to go back and see some of these were cop-outs. Ultimately, I guess when it came down to it, Kurt, you did bring out more points and you did have more hits and knockbacks on Alex, especially on the length issue, because you did bring up Godfather. You brought out so many other movies that have a longer runtime. So I will give this point to Kirk.
And we are still headed to the speed round. Kirk has a 2-1 lead going into the speed round. For those who don't know, this is how the speed round is going to work. So I will state the question. Whoever says their answer first, we're going to do answer first. We'll get to choose that, and then the second person can say their answer. You will have 30 seconds to fight in round 1, and then you'll have 15 seconds to fight in round 2 for rebuttals. All right, let's get right into it. First question of the speed round is as follows. What is the best score for a science fiction film?
Empire Strikes Back.
Terminator.
All right.
Terminator Judgment Day. Sorry, I don't know if I could change it.
Yeah, Judgment Day.
Judgment Day. Yeah.
All right. Empire Strikes Back first. Terminator Judgment Day. Yet another long-awaited battle. So, Kirk, we heard your choice first, so you'll have 30 seconds once you start talking. Actually, first, Matt, you good on the time?
Yes, sir.
All right, Kirk, whenever you're ready.
The only reason it took me so long to choose because I had to decide what Star Wars movie I wanted to go with. But Empire Strikes Back hits more moods than any of the other movies. You get the initial fanfare, you get the crawl and the big operatic theme. But you also, this is the movie that introduces the Imperial March, which has become the theme for evil. You hear that at basketball games, you hear bands playing at football games. That is just the quintessential bad guy sound now. You have the music on Dagobah. You have the music when there are the quiet moments.
All right, Alec, 30 seconds when you start talking.
Terminator Judgment Day has one of the greatest scores for an action/sci-fi movie, I think, of all time. You have that instant dun, 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 that everyone always knows. I don't know if everyone pays attention to wrestling, but there's a wrestler named Kenny Omega. He does that before one of his moves. They call him the Terminator for a reason, and it's because that score in that movie has become so ingrained in people's minds. You have all the other music that basically sets all the tones for I think one of probably the greatest action movie of all time. And I'm
Time. Good stop, mate.
I felt it.
All right, Kirk, 15 seconds once you begin.
Yeah, you have those 5 beats everybody knows, dun, 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 and that's it. From that, it's pretty forgettable. It's more Guns N' Roses than it is theme. Empire Strikes Back, iconic. John Williams. Everybody knows the opening score. Everybody knows Imperial March. There's nothing bigger than that. That's just going down in history as one of the greatest scores ever.
Time.
And then Alec, 15 more seconds.
Yes, it's the same beats that everyone knows, but for a reason. That's how great that score was. It's so iconic. The Imperial March is iconic as well, but to me, there's nothing more iconic than the initial beats, and it sets the tone for what you're going to be getting in all the Terminator movies. So I will.
Time.
All right, time. Well done. So this is game point for Kirk. Alec fighting to stay alive. Let's see what our judges have to say. Let's go to Matt first.
You're muted.
No,
I started
I
it
heard
and then stopped. The Terminator theme, it is iconic. I mean, you hear dun dun dun, and you know it's the Terminator. But when you hear anything from Empire, you know it's Star Wars. I mean, immediately, like he said, it's immediate. You know it's Star Wars. You know the Imperial March. You hear it everywhere, like he said. So there's no question this one goes to Kirk.
All right, 1 point towards Kirk. Ryan, what do you got?
I might slightly have to argue against you, Matt, because the initial beat you're talking about, Terminator, the one in Judgment Day is kind of more of a more harder and more louder version to the original Terminator, which was more subtle, and both of them are both very malleable to both because it tells the tone of both movies. But it is synonymous. I mean, just like the Imperial Marches for Star Wars, but the Terminator beat is very synonymous. That I would have to say for Star Wars, the opening number for the crawl is much stronger compared to the Imperial March. Because once you hear that, ta-da, then you know it's Star Wars. So as much as I love the Imperial March, I'm going to go with Alec on this one. And also, as a side note, for the new Terminator trailer, many people were arguing why they didn't hear that da-dun-dun-dun-dun in the Dark Fate trailer. So I would have to go for Alec on that one.
All right. We've got 1 point apiece, which means, again, I have to do stuff. All right. Here is what I heard. I heard from one person. From one person, I just heard a lot more, and that I won't hold us too much in suspense. I heard many things from Kirk. I heard about the Imperial March being the theme for evil. I heard about the opening fanfare. I heard about the different tones that play out in Empire Strikes Back. And I think his knock against Terminator was one that sort of stuck with me, that you do remember those opening 5, da-da-dun-da-dun, and then everything else is sort of a little forgettable, and I didn't hear anything else from Alec to make me think otherwise. So that means my point and the match is going to go to Kirk Kowalkowski. So well done, sir.
All right.
Very good match, guys.
Yeah.
Great match all around. Let's talk to the winner real quick. Kirk, how are you feeling?
First of all, I want to say hats off to Alec. He fought a heck of a match. He came at me blow by blow. Everything I thought I had ready, he was ready to counter. And if you can beat West Side Story with Sweeney Todd, you have a future in Battleground. So it was a great first match for him. Sorry it didn't go his way, but I think he did great. I feel great. I think I prepped for it, and I think it shows. Really dug into all these, really put a lot of thought into it. So I'm glad that paid off. Thank you again, Alec. Thank you, judges, especially Ryan. Thank you for coming in late. Thank you, everybody. Had a great time. Enjoyed it.
All right. Well done. And let's hear from Alec a little bit. Alec, how are you feeling?
Man, that was a tough battle. It's a lot different being on this side of the ropes, inside mixing it up. Pretty tough. It's great to do it against a great opponent like Kirk. Thank you for letting me come in late and battle you. You got a lot of tough hits on me. I tried to take as many as I could, but it just wasn't enough. But I'll be back.
Absolutely.
Good. Well done. I hope to see both of you back. It was a great time. Kirk, you did a great job. In your next match, you will be going up against the one and only Grant Gregory. So I hope everyone is looking forward to that. Looks like you just found out that yourself. So I'm sure you'll prepare just as well. Alec, I'm sure we'll see you again. It was a great time. Pleasure being involved. So thank you all for being in tune on another exciting episode of Movie Battlegrounds. Hopefully we'll see you next time.